Welcome to Countdown to Classic, a podcast that educates, informs, and gossips about World of Warcraft Classic. Every Monday and Wednesday we discuss the news, hot button issues, and content of the highly anticipated World of Warcraft Classic. I'm your host, Josh Corbett, and I am an avid fan of the vanilla days of World of Warcraft and a podcast veteran. So I figured, why not combine my two passions and bring you this show? However, please remember that as much as I love and adore this game, I'm not the go-to authority on all things World of Warcraft, but guess who is? It's you, the listeners and fans. And that's why this podcast is about you and what you're talking about throughout the week online, as much as it is about this amazing game that we've all come to know and love. I am just a fanboy of WoW and a mouthpiece for the news and conversations that we're all taking part in online. I try to stay as neutral as possible and present both sides of all of the discussions presented on this show. But just before we get to the good stuff, please do bear with me for just a little bit of housekeeping. I just want to let you know that you can find all things Countdown to Classic online at countdowntoclassic.com. Please do check out the website, everyone. I really am trying to develop that a little bit further, putting up some news items, some polls, a bit of fun for all the listeners. Go and check it out. Also, there's some details about all of our YouTube channels and the Discord channels and everything you can think of there. So go have a look. Also, please, importantly, subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcast from, and like, follow, or subscribe to the show on social media. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Countdown to Classic, or on Twitter at Count2Classic with the number 2. And also, as I mentioned, there's the YouTube page at Countdown to Classic. One small favor I would ask is that if you're currently listening to the show on YouTube and you're liking what you're hearing, then please do click the download or stream links on the website as well, as I primarily lean on those figures as a look into how the show is growing. Now, as Countdown to Classic is a show about you, yes, you listening right now, the players, this is an interactive experience, and I absolutely love, adore, want to hear your feedback or input on the show. You can drop me a line on all socials or email me at feedback@countdowntoclassic.com. Also, everyone, if you love this show and you can't get enough of me for some reason, and you love comedy and you love movies, then please do head over to my other podcast, The Cinephiles, at cinephiles.com. That's SINNERFILES. It's not just me. There's two jokers that I do it with, and trust me on this one, everyone. We're actually kind of fucking hilarious. It's a popular show here in Australia, and if I do say so myself, the jokes are much better than what you get here with the one-man band on Countdown to Classic. We just recently did The Dark Knight, which was a really, really funny one, and also The Shawshank Redemption, which was a riot as well. So please do go over there and check us out, and thank you for putting up with that shameless plug. But we're going to get to Countdown to Classic now. I'll have a few more announcements about future episodes, show news. The downloads are still going nuts, everyone. Almost 2,000 of you tuned into the show last week alone. That is crazy. We'll do some more shout outs for specific people and places, including our new Belarus watch. Stay tuned for that at the end of the show. So please do stick around for all that. Now, normally I would lead the show with Forum and Fauna, but this week I'm mixing it up slightly with a special surprise for you all. Normally on Wednesdays we have a top 5 segment where I basically make a dick of myself and try to make you guys laugh at some stupid stuff that I made up in relation to the game. This week, a listener got in touch with the following when they emailed Countdown to Classic at feedback@countdowntoclassic.com, as I mentioned earlier. This is what happens when you email me. I actually read it out on the show. So, this listener said, "Hi Josh, Love the podcast. I'm not a diehard WoW player, more casual, but the podcast is filling me with nostalgia and excitement, and I can't wait for the return of Classic. I heard you say in episode number 2 that you would try to give shout-outs or something like that. Now, I'm trying to get my girlfriend Laura to dabble in the World of Warcraft. Would a kind of joking mention like this be possible? Looking forward to the next episode. Kind regards, Sam. Well, Sam, just for you, let's kick this episode off right with a bit of fun straight off the top with a top 5 reasons to play World of Warcraft with your significant other. Now, what I try to do with these top 5 lists, if you're not too familiar with them, is every Wednesday I come up with a bit of creative fun for the Wednesday lore episodes and have a top 5 list in relation to the content that we just discussed. But today, as I mentioned, just for Sam, we'll do the top 5 benefits of getting your partner into World of Warcraft. So I'm sure a few of us have been in this position when you're trying to get the missus or the mister into the game. And here we go with number 5. Live action shipping roleplay. You could even use the characters' names. Oh, Poonface, I've always loved you. I feel the same way about you, Jiznuts. It works. Just try it out. Number 4. You can always settle your arguments with a duel. Oh, you think it's my turn to take out the garbage tonight, do you? Well, let's settle this in Goldshare, asshole. And how about you stream this one so all your mates can see how you go down? That's what I thought. Number 3. You can finally give them that joint bank account that they've always been bugging you about. Sweetheart, it's just as good as the real thing. I gave you my WoW login details. If that's not love, baby, I don't know what is. Number 2. When they suddenly understand you, when they ask why you're upset, and you reply with, my guild just wiped after the fucking main tank had to go AFK, didn't tell anyone about it, and it was the start of our 3rd try on Ragnaros for the night, and the useless off-tanks couldn't get threat back after the DPS had already gone nuts. Honestly, where are people's brains? Man Crick's wife, babe. Man Crick's wife. See, that'll all make sense to your partner now if you get them into the game. And the number 1 reason to get your significant other into World of Warcraft is you won't be the only one calling out your character's name during sex. And there you go. So that one's just for you, Sam. I hope you enjoyed it. And please put that to your girlfriend and see what she says. Maybe that will be the clincher that seals the deal. Anyway, now that we've had a bit of fun and we've all loosened up, how about we get into the meat of the show with Forum and Fauna? Every Monday, Countdown to Classic comes to you with 3 of the hottest topics from the WoW Classic forums or the WoW Classic subreddit. And this week, the first topic that I want to lead with is naturally the topic that was on a lot of people's lips this week. Ion Hazzikostas finally says the word classic and the world freaks out. Even though he didn't tell us much. It's still something. Hey, it counts, everyone. So, if you weren't aware, a few days ago on March 15th, there was a developer question and answer session on Twitch for Battle for Azeroth with Josh Allen, community manager at Blizzard, and Ion Hazzikostas, the World of Warcraft game director. Oh, and by the way, it's totally Ion. I see a lot of people going for Ion, which obviously with the way it's spelt, that I-O-N, you might be led to believe that's it, but Josh Allen clearly calls him Ion during the video, so I would like to think that the Blizzard employees know their colleagues' names when they're saying them for the world to hear. So, we're going with Ian. Anyway, 30,000 plus people watched this video, and apparently many were asking the same question. What's up with Classic? Apparently they were asking it so much that Hazzikostas felt the need to address Classic first in this Battle for Azeroth question and answer session. Now I'm going to play you a clip of what he said. He said the following.
Obviously today is a Battle for Azeroth Q&A.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's I've seen some questions, seen some rumblings, wondering what's up with our Classic project. Obviously we announced it at BlizzCon. At the time, what Jay said on stage it was the beginning of a journey. And shortly after that, we posted job openings, looking for people to come help us make it. Some astute observers may notice that a couple of the listings that were on our careers website not too long ago are no longer on our careers website. So work continues. We would love to share more, and we'll do so when we're able. But for now, let's talk BFA.
So that was the long and short of Blizzard's latest official comment on Classic. And as we're so devoid of Classic news lately, frankly, the Blizzard janitor saying the word Classic would be considered big news these days, let alone the game's director. And obviously people were talking about this in the forums. Now this comment brings up the following argument. There are two sides of the coin to this one. And as we do here on Countdown to Classic, we argue for both sides of the coin and go through the pros and cons so everyone can be mildly happy at the end of the day. Now, 2 points that we could derive from Hazzikostas' comments are the following. Firstly, Blizzard are the devil and are ruining all the Classic hype by staying silent. Or secondly, we trust Blizzard. They'll say something when they have something worth saying. Chill out. What we're going to do today is we're going to start with that second point, and then we'll go through them all one by one. So, firstly, we'll start with the second argument, being sort of in Blizz we trust. And what I do is I go through a few forum postings to highlight people's different points of view on this. So, the first post comes from Reddit user Triangle Sunflowers, who says the following, and they're starting with a quote of Hazzikostas. "We'll do so when we're able, but for now, let's talk BFA." End quote. And the user says, translation, "If we have something to say, we will say it. This is why it's pointless to ask for updates. Do not put yourself under any illusion that you are an important part of the development process, or that you are entitled to be. You are not part of a movement. You are people waiting for a video game to be released, just like any other video game. Pre-release speculation is always pointless, whether it's movies, games, or books. When it comes out, you'll either want to play it or you won't. Nothing that happens up until that point will have any relevance. If Blizzard wants feedback, they'll ask for it." Now, the point that this user raises is that Blizz owes us nothing. Traditionally, there are quite long development times behind Blizzard games. They are relatively stoic in the amount and timing of the announcements they have in relation to their games and the press releases that they give out. They take their time to develop quality games. This is Blizzard's history. We're all quite used to it by this point. So the question is, knowing that they've already given us amazing content in the past that has become a huge part of our lives, and knowing that we can somewhat trust them, why do we now put pressure on them to give us regular updates about a game they're in the early stages of making? As the poster says, this isn't a movement. We're not a cult, I think, and they're not the leader, I think. And so weekly sermons aren't required, particularly when there is no news. What do you want? Do you want Hazzikostas to say, "This week in WoW Classic News, we're still making the game, and Jimmy clogged the men's toilet on the second floor. Again. Thanks, Jimmy." When they have something to say, they will say it. The sky isn't falling. We don't hound other developers like this. No one's kicking down Square Enix's door for a morsel of Final Fantasy VII Remake news. We know it's 9 years away. Sorry, I'm a big Final Fantasy fan. Ongoing joke, like to think it's never coming. But the point is, why do we harass a company that has done nothing but earn, rightfully so, our goodwill over time? Some people love to play the burn Blizzard down because they've ruined World of Warcraft for us, but many of those people forget that they gave it to us in the first place as well. And I would like to think that they have earned enough of our respect and trust over time to perhaps just leave them be for a small amount of time and let them do their development thing. But the other end of the spectrum comes from user 2Send, who says this: I mean, Brack did specifically say, we announced this project maybe a little bit too early because we want to partner with the community. But they haven't exactly been doing that. So far, the only partnering with the community we've seen so far is the creation of the classic forums. Why even mention that as a reason for announcing early? And the point they are raising there is screw Blizzard. They flat out said they wanted to engage with us, the community. Wouldn't this happen by way of, blue posts, questions and answers, door knocks? I want Hazzikostas out there kissing babies. Silence wasn't what was anticipated after you said you wanted to talk to us. That's like saying, hi, how are you? And just walking away while the person you were talking to was answering. The classic forums were created by Blizzard and they basically walked away and chaos ensued. Perhaps if Blizzard piped up and told us what was happening, that would soothe the savage beast, rather than sitting back and watching people tear each other down and shitting all over the forum rules of general good behavior. Sure. Maybe Blizzard is reading every post and listening, so to speak. But a lack of a word has some people worried that they're not listening at all. And if they are listening, you could actually make a, gasp, shock, horror, game without our input. Oh, perish the thought. Who could ever think they could make their own game without our input? Not on my watch. Look, that's some people. That's not me personally. But obviously there are some people that feel this way. They're like, no, we have a right to have a say in the game that you are going to be making for us. I mean, it's few and far between that there are people saying this on the forums. And obviously I do understand where they're coming from, and that this is actually exactly what Blizzard said to us. They told us, we want you and your thoughts. So then when we give you our thoughts, why do you not then talk back to us about what you think of our thoughts? And then what you're thinking about our thoughts about what we're thinking when you're thinking about those thoughts. Something like that. Anyway, the funniest thing I actually saw this week was someone on the WoW Classic subreddit, and for the life of me, I can't remember the thread and I can't remember the person who said it, but I know I saw it because it made me laugh quite a bit. They suggested that Blizzard actually owes us a weekly update, basically saying we've got no news. And the fact that they were at least no commenting would be enough to placate that person. To which I say, seriously? Isn't that basically the same thing as silence? Do you need someone to tell you that you're still broke and single when you go to bed at night as well? Because that's what they'd be telling me if I needed a regular update. But this whole notion that we want some kind of regularity from Blizzard, even though they've got nothing to tell us, at least they're talking to us, I think is a bit silly. It's literally, again, they will talk to us when they are good and ready, when they have something worthwhile saying. I don't need to hear from Ion Hazzikostas like he did, dutifully in this Battle for Azeroth question and answer session. He addressed the WoW Classic community when he didn't really need to. He had nothing to say, but he still acknowledged us. I don't need that acknowledgement. I'm like, no, knuckle down, go work on the game, you go do your thing, and it'll be ready when it's ready. You don't owe me an explanation, so I think it's all fine. But obviously some people disagree. We go back now to the pro-Blizz argument with a post from user Porno Video Game Dev, totally stealing that username one day, and they say the following. Blizz is always listening. They just don't always agree. Don't forget we are talking about a game that is being developed for no other reason than the community wanted it. And they listened. The point that Porno Video Game Dev raises is don't bite the hand that feeds. We wanted something. The private server communities, the advocates for WoW Classic, and Blizzard gave it to us. Do we really want to piss them off from here? Because some people aren't happy with the process which a game developer is choosing to develop their own game? Relax. They're big enough to be reading what we're writing and get a pulse of the community. They said they wanted our feedback, and that's likely what they're looking at with their own creation of the classic forums. They created this game for us. They're now not going to fuck us over. At least that's what I would like to believe. Some people feel very differently because they feel that it's happened in the past. However, You don't put the amount of resources, time, money, and general calorie-burning effort into a huge project like this without doing it at least partially for the players. We screened for years, and they heard. They didn't owe us Classic, and they don't owe us comments. So just sit back and wait until they have something to say, and they're not going to stay silent forever, I'm guessing. Also, it's incredibly noteworthy that Ian talked about Classic at all, let alone first, in a Battle for Azeroth question and answer session. He would have been well within his rights and not criticised in the slightest, I feel, to have not said anything about Classic. And as much as we all want that information, I just don't think he could have necessarily killed the guy online for not having had said anything. But we move back now to the anti-Blizz argument, and user GTS Now says the following, quote, "We're working on it," end quote. We already know this. We want to know something new about the development of Classic WoW. Any accomplishments? Like, come on. It's been nearly 5 months now. And the point that user is raising is perhaps a valid one to some. They say that time is building up. This was fun for a couple of months, but now it's been over 4 months. Not 5 like the user suggests. It's been over 4 months. But it's been over 4 months and not a word. What gives, Blizzard? Now, I just want to talk about the development process briefly, and while we don't know exactly when development started on Classic, we can guess from what we've heard so far. The prevailing theory is that given what's been said so far, being the actual announcement, J. Allen Brack's Forbes interview, and now Hazzikostas' Q&A mention, development had just started at the time of announcement, or at least very close to it. There is no beta, there is no alpha. They weren't secretly years into the development and ready to drop this bad boy anytime soon. Job postings were up about it. They were still getting filled post-announcement. I understand that people are getting impatient after 4 months, but this isn't a usual 4 months after an announcement. Usually an announcement is closer to something being ready. They blatantly said, we're announcing earlier than usual because we want community feedback, and thus there's no news because there's no product. Sure, they could tell us what they have decided to do regarding the decisions on things like new graphics, quality of life changes, etc., but why announce that and watch the forums burn down into changes versus no changes even further than they already have? They might just do that closer to the time of release. Now, I don't think Classic is coming anytime soon. It's becoming clearer than ever that this seems to be at least perhaps 12 to 18 months away minimum. They'll have news when they're closer to alphas and betas and things of that nature. No news means we have nothing to comment on because we're still building something of note. Now, the final point I want to raise on this first topic of the podcast is the conduct of the comments that were brought up in the live chat on Twitch during the question and answer session. Now, it does come back to a little bit of a saga that some of you might find quite boring, and some of you might even say like, oh my God, Josh, don't talk about this guy, don't give him the press. But I mean, look, it's in the news, and quite frankly, Countdown to Classic covers the news, so this is all part of it. Some people were talking about YouTuber Alex Sensual before and after the question and answer session. It was quite the week for Alex Sensual. If you're not sure who he is, he's a YouTuber who's an advocate for Classic WoW, and his videos on YouTube have a certain look and feel to them, and some people are for him, some people are against him. A very, very divisive character within the WoW Classic community for sure. But the story goes that he put a video up on YouTube prior to the Q&A asking his followers not to flood the Battle for Azeroth chat with Classic-related questions, basically saying, hey, let's be respectful, let's not be trolls, let's just let them do their BFA thing. With the theory being that, it's poor form to ask certain questions in inappropriate forums, such as, dropping something in the wrong subreddit, dropping a question in the wrong particular forum, how dare you ask a tiger question in the lion forum? We get that stuff all the time. But then we got this post from Reddit user Embriel in regards to what happened during the BFA Q&A, saying this: At least Alex got satisfaction from having his cultists go over there and spam Classic for 2 straight hours. He told them after the stream that he was very proud of them. Makes our entire community look like a bunch of children. So good job, I guess. Reply by user Autism Prime. Lol, if you think people were only spamming about Classic because of Alex, you're delusional. Reply again from Embriel. I was in his stream when he told his 300-odd viewers to do it. He was talking to them constantly during the Q&A about it and complimented them on a job well done afterwards. But sure, I'm probably delusional. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is it raises a very important point. How does the Classic community come across as looking when this kind of stuff happens? Is it the only way we'll get our point across? For example, well-known YouTuber Asmongold jumped on Twitter 2 days before the Q&A and mentioned at Blizz asking for some Classic info, please, during the question and answer session. Now, I think there's a little bit of a difference there. I don't think that's necessarily out of line at all, perhaps a little bit cheeky, because we know it's a BFA Q&A, but still the light prodding for information prior to the event, I think, is somewhat fine. However, during the live chat, some feel that that's crossing the line, and apparently Alex Sensual's devotees were seen to be asking a lot of Classic questions, flooding the chat, and being cheered on by Alex during his stream for doing so. So, the question is Alex Sensual a crusader, pushing Blizz to forcibly comment on Classic as Hazzikostas did, or is he more of a chat hijacker, pushing the conversation away from what they were there to actually talk about? Now, Battle for Azeroth is a really big deal, and obviously a lot of people still play retail World of Warcraft. I renewed my sub just this week to play retail again for the first time in 5 years for the purposes of Twitch streaming for the show, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what BFA has to offer once I get there and once it's released. But my point is, there were 30,000 people watching that question and answer session, and I'm guessing that the majority were there for what the fucking title of the question and answer said, Battle for Azeroth. And hence, they would have had a lot of Battle for Azeroth related questions that they wanted to ask and hoped to have Ian notice and answer. But instead, they get flooded out by Classic requests. Is that fair? Is it any different to being the guy that just slides into the front of a long queue? Oh, no, I was totally here before. I just went for a 2-hour-long piss. Now, there are 2 arguments here. One, we need to hassle Blizz or they won't do anything at all. Or 2, this behavior reflects badly on the Classic community and will turn Blizzard against us to the point that they'll just shut up shop even further than they already have. Now, it's a bit of a prickly topic, so I ask you, where do you lie on this one? Please email the show at feedback@countdowntoclassic.com. Tell me if you think I've been way off in any of my descriptions of what's happened recently, or tell me where your allegiances lie. Should we hound Blizz so that they get to us, or should we leave them be because otherwise it reflects badly on the community? Is it the case that quote-unquote social media warriors, like Alex Sensual, aren't the heroes we deserve, but the heroes we need? Or is he just that guy calling for an unwarranted riot, pitchforks and all? When is troll-like behavior justified? Some might say never. Anyway, that's just a little bit of food for thought for you all. But the final thing I want to do on this topic is give you my analysis of what Hazzikostas said. Now, this is kind of the thing that happens every time when Blizzard actually does officially comment on Classic. We all jump online with the transcriptions and we tear it down word by word and jump on all the YouTube videos trying to get into the deeper meaning of what was really said. But I'm just going to give you my thoughts, and they're pretty basic. It goes like this. We'll go through it sort of slowly. Here's what Hazzikostas said. It was the beginning of a journey, and shortly after that, we posted job openings looking for people to come help us make it. Now, my interpretation of that is basically we thought of Classic the day before the announcement. Okay, well, maybe not quite that, but obviously incredibly close to the time was when it was actually conceived. They were very early in development to the point that they didn't even have a full staff. So the interpretation of that is that they're building a team to build this new tech from the ground up, and it's not coming anytime soon. Hazzikostas goes on to say, some observers might have noticed that a couple of the listings has been closed that were on our careers website not too long ago are no longer on our career website. So work continues. Interpretation. They only just finished forming the team. You wouldn't ask where the Thundercats were at if it was just Lion-O standing around with a now hiring sign, would you? Yes, I just made a dated reference to a 30-year-old cartoon and showed my age. What about it? Anyway, the Thundercats are cool. But my point is, they only just got the gang together. Let's give them some breathing space and let them learn each other's names and that Jimmy is a toilet clogger before we hassle them for intricate details. Shout out to Jimmy again. Hazzikostas finishes with, hope to have and love to share some more and will do so when we're able. Interpretation, they're keen to build the hype on this and they will do so when they actually have something to say. For all we know, they're still on their Florida-like third recount of the updated character model's internal vote. So let's just let them talk when they have something to say, unlike our friend who wants them just to say hello once a week. And with that, it's time to move on to the second topic of today's podcast. And this topic is based on a post I saw on the WoW Classic subreddit this week titled, I just realized I'm pro changes. And this was put up by user Pink Symmetra. Now, they go through the following post, but it's one point in particular that I'm going to focus on. But Pink Symmetra says the following. Maybe I never really thought this through, but I always agreed with the no changes posts. However, I also agree with some changes. For example, 1. Fixing dire more solo runs because no class should be waltzing alone through level 60 dungeons alone. 2. Finishing unfinished content like the Druid's Aquatic Form quest or that one Shaman Totem quest line. 3. Nerfing warriors DPS scaling because one class should never dominate 2/3 of the Trinity. 4. Prevent pre-mades from dodging each other in battlegrounds. Not everyone even wants to avoid fair fights. It's just the most efficient way to climb ranks. That's degenerative gameplay. But this is the one that caught my eye, everyone. Number 5. And it did get some comments. Change the turn-ins for the AQ war effort. Otherwise, there will be no war effort on some servers because the top guilds will stockpile everything in advance. And Pink Symmetra finishes up with, I think these changes would all improve the game in some way. Am I mistaken? But just focusing on that one point that they raise at the end, should the Anchorage war effort require the same items as they were in vanilla? Now, if you're not quite sure, from back in the day, there was a laundry list of items that both factions collected in order to help open the gates of Anchorage on every respective server. And they ranged from copper bars, purple lotus, thick leather, light leather, roast raptor, Arthas's tears, peace bloom, baked salmon, all that jazz. The full list is on WoW Wiki. I recommend you go have a look if you can't remember. But the point is that we know what those items are. So the extension of the point from the original poster is our first pro comment in terms of, yes, we should change the items for this go round in Classic. Now, this is from user Give Me a Drink, who says the following. Something needs to be done about the AQ war effort. It doesn't make sense to leave it as it is with full knowledge. From day one, everyone will be stockpiling the required mats and the whole thing will be pointless. They need to create new required mats that only drop during the event. Now, that's a very interesting point. Make the items event-only items. It would completely eradicate the possibility of pre-planning by top players, top guilds, and everything like that. It makes it fun for all. Everyone and every server would be placed on an even keel. It would be inclusive, and it would dissuade elitism gathering practices in terms of just hoarding everything from day one on the WoW Classic servers in full knowledge of what's to come with AQ. It's just, I think it's a really interesting wrinkle that this user has raised, and perhaps it's something that Blizzard actually is thinking about. Would a event-only drop change things to a point that you'd be happy with. However, we quickly get to the argument against that post with a user Wish Doctor's Song who adds the following. The problem here is one of the major functions of the war effort was to drive up prices and drastically decrease the supply of many materials that had been flooding the market. The war effort is basically a mid-expansion economic readjustment. Moving to specific quest items for the effort removes this very important function. That's an amazing point in counter, because obviously what they're saying there is you have to understand and be able to wrap your head around what Blizzard is trying to do economically in the World of Warcraft. The World of Warcraft isn't all just necessarily a little bit of fun. There are serious balancing issues and decisions to be made by Blizzard with regards to a growing economy, just as much as they do with class balancing, for example. And the one point they must take into account whenever doing anything with items is, how will this affect the economy? And the oversupply of certain items might require a correction. And the economy of World of Warcraft really is fascinating to me. I couldn't be any less economically inclined in the brain department, but it really does interest me. And I'll tell you a story soon as to why it does in terms of what I did in Vanilla WoW and how I made my money back in the day. But the main point by this user is that everything happens for a reason, and there was a major reason behind the AQ war effort. Blizzard identified certain items that kind of had to be culled, if you will, and they had players collect them, and by doing so, obviously, they were wiped away off the auction house because everyone was buying them in order to put them in for the turn-in for the AQ war effort so we could open the gates so we could kick some ass. So it is interesting that is a thing that is able to be done when they sit around and scratch their heads and go, fuck, how do we fix this economy? Things are getting a bit out of control. And obviously there are some answers. But we get a response to this counterpoint from user Lenlandan, who says the following. That's a very interesting point. The problem still exists because the economic impact occurred at that time because we didn't know it was coming. Prior knowledge just creates the economic impact earlier, which isn't quite what we want. The larger question is, of course, how do you maintain a healthy economy in an MMO? Blizzard has yet to figure that out because it's a really hard problem. Now, before people go all hashtag no changes on me, I'm not necessarily suggesting these get implemented in Classic. There could be mini war efforts that take specific items there are too much of out of the economy. The issue here is one of rewards. There has to be some incentive to turn stuff in that is basically endlessly repeatable but doesn't break the game. I don't know what that would be unless we went the route of transmogs or just dies a la Diablo 3 and pets, which most of us don't want. Mounts? Maybe something like respec tokens? The problem there is respec cost is an important gold sink. Now, the point this user makes is perhaps you could do it, but maybe even with other wrinkles, or just some kind of mechanic in the game that fixes economic issues because Blizz never quite worked out the economy in the first place. Did Blizz work out the economy in your mind? What were your experiences with the World of Warcraft economy? Do we want or even need Blizzard to step in with efforts like the AQ war effort when it's a player-driven economy? Do we want to be left to our own devices and sort it out ourselves and either let it all burn or let it attempt to flourish? Now, back in the vanilla days, I was somewhat of the auctioneer and I absolutely loved it. I made a shit ton of gold in vanilla, and I worked it out early by simply playing the auction house. I was a early adopter of the eBay type theory with auction housing, and some of you might hate players like me, but I earned my living back in the day by buying many items off the auction house, greens, blues, purples, what have you, and identifying them at a low price, like a very low price when you see a very motivated seller, picking it up and then happily just reposting it straight away at the proper market value. I worked out really quickly that this was incredibly easy money, and I would wake up every day to log on to see my mailbox flooded with sales and gold, and I never went through the pain of having to worry about mount money because both of my mounts were so easily taken care of by the time I needed them gold-wise. It was just never even a thing I had to concern myself with. I was loaded, and then Burning Crusade came around and sort of slowly started to change things, and then definitely by the time Wrath rolled around, I was well out of the game in terms of gold because everyone was kind of loaded all of a sudden. But I enjoyed this player-driven momentum behind the economy. No set prices, no price recommendations. It's all about market feel and keeping a pulse on player supply and demand. And also checking historic prices of items and realizing what one perhaps should be paying for an item and identifying when it's not quite been posted at what it should be. Do we need other systems or other outside sources of intervention to fix the economy that we have cultivated? Was the economy broken outside of the AQ effort to clear out those certain items? Was it screwed anyway? Let me know what you think. But this next post, I feel, really does answer that question. And it's from user PHRSTBRN. I'm not even going to try and pronounce that. And they say, I don't think it's ever possible to balance the economy with systems with fixed drop rates of junk items and gold, and vendors that will buy an unlimited number of junk items for fixed amounts of gold. There are some things, but things that I doubt many MMOs will attempt. You need to somehow restrict the money supply. For a start, adjust vendor prices based on the money supply and or adjust drop rates on junk items / gold based on money supply. Some things being fixed prices are probably fine. Raid bosses dropping fixed amount of gold is probably fine since you can only kill them once a week, and quests since you can typically only do them once or are time gated in some other way. As for players who manage to hoard money, you probably need to get creative here. The lazy solution is to charge them gold storage fees or something like that. You can call it upkeep, like in Warcraft 3. Maybe you even go as far as to change drop rates for junk items based on how much gold your account has. I admit these are probably terrible ideas, but you need to somehow stop the 1% from being able to hoard lots of gold that they have no real use for. Now, this is an amazing, amazing point. And even me being one of those 1%ers from back in the day, I was one of the richest people on my server and I fucking loved it. But yes, I hoarded a lot of gold. Should I be stopped from doing so? Should Blizzard actually actively think about adjusting or changing the way in which the economy works in World of Warcraft Classic? Now, stop it. Everyone, I can hear you all jumping up and down. No changes. And this would be a fucking huge change. I'm saying this very much so tongue-in-cheek, guys, so please do take it with a huge grain of salt as it's intended. We're more just sort of talking very hypothetically here, but changing the economy and effectively implementing a tax system, I think, is what this user is suggesting. The higher earners give up more to achieve more. It's a really intriguing wrinkle, and is it a change that Blizz would ever even consider, or any game dev for that matter, in relation to an MMO in the future? But, I mean, despite the fact that this suggestion would put me in the poorhouse for Classic, I think it's really cool. More importantly, though, is it even possible? Probably not. Although I did see a robot jack a guy off while he watched VR porn the other day. So who knows what's possible in this day and age? What a time to be alive. But just ride along with me on this one and entertain the notion of not being able to game the system per se with fixed prices on the same goods all the time. In a real economy, prices fluctuate due to supply and demand and the cash flow of the seller and the buyer. Imagine a smart system where an NPC could realize that the green item you wanted to dump on them for some reason rather than just taking it to the auction house isn't necessarily in abundance, and that NPC could offer you a higher price or offer you less, depending on what the supply is like at the time. I think such a dynamic economy would be fucking outrageous and really, really cool and interesting. I don't necessarily want it in WoW Classic, but I just think it's something to really get those creative juices flowing and let you guys think about what perhaps could be the future for MMO economies. Anyway, we move back to the pro-argument for changing the items in the Encourage war effort with this submission from Dirty South Boys, who says the following. This is such a great idea, and it doesn't deviate whatsoever from vanilla. In fact, it makes it more vanilla-like because nobody had any idea what it was going to be material-wise before the war effort was released. Beauty! Their point is obviously this. If you really want the vanilla experience, change the items. It's actually technically a non-change masquerading as a change. Knowledge of the items kills the effort part of war effort. Top guilds and players will work towards this from the get-go, and they'll open the gates incredibly quickly, thus somewhat defeating the fun and the tantalizing wait for those gates to open. If you take away the knowledge, you put everyone where they were when they first played World of Warcraft, in the dark. And in a version where virtually nothing will be a surprise to us, why not at least give us this when you can, Blizzard? We know entirely what is coming with World of Warcraft Classic. There will be no surprises unless you finally announce to us what potential changes you're making to the game. But I'm talking content-wise. We know the game. We know all the bosses. We know all the raids. We know all the dungeons. We know all the items, blah, blah, blah. In this one particular instance where you can conceivably mix things up without changing the game mechanics and without having it a change that would get the no changes crowd upset. And if you are no changes, if you're an absolute purist, please write to me if you still think it's heresy that we consider changing the AQ war effort items. But what I'm getting at is, would it not still be the case that they could somewhat get away with this one and let us have a little shred of our innocence back and take us back to a point in time where we were like, wow, we need those items? Cool, shit, I'll go collect as many as I can. I've got none on me now, but I'll go do what I can for the Horde, for the Alliance, whatever, for let's get to Encourage, you know what I mean? But I just think that would be quite fun, and I would be delighted to see that implemented in World of Warcraft Classic. But we go back to the anti-argument with this final post from user Slovenheim, who says the following. I think most of the no changes guys think like you. It's just that most of us are afraid that allowing leeway would be opening Pandora's box. Now, their point is the old slippery slope argument, and I'm not going to get into that today. That's a whole other crazy thing, perhaps for another day. You know, the old, how slippery could that slope be, and will it just lead us back to retail? Some say learn from the mistakes of the past, no changes. Some say we can't presume a few small changes will lead to an ongoing onslaught of changes. But anyway, that's for another day, something to think about just for now. But with that, we move on to the third topic of the day, and that is a post that I found titled the following: Playing Vanilla to Get to BC. Content progression. Now, this was put up on, again, the WoW Classic subreddit by user We Wait Again. And they said the following: I'm super hyped for WoW Classic, but what I miss most is the Burning Crusade. I am without a doubt 100% sure that if Vanilla Classic is a success, then the Burning Crusade Classic will be inevitable. There will be such a massive public outcry for it once the first batch of Classic servers has released and Nax is nearing its end progression-wise. So, the discussion here is, if WoW Classic is a smash hit, are Burning Crusade servers a foregone conclusion? Now, the pro-argument for Burning Crusade content firstly comes from user Sulinia, who says the following: I'm fine with vanilla coming as the first thing. I love it. But I'm not going to deny that the ultimate goal for me is the Burning Crusade servers which might come after. Easily my favorite state of WoW. Now, the point here is the Burning Crusade came at a time when the world was really waking up to World of Warcraft. January 15th, 2007, that was the release date of Burning Crusade. WoW was really hitting its stride around the world, and many players who still play the game today were introduced to it either at the very tail end of vanilla or just at the outset of the Burning Crusade. So, do the same nostalgia goggles that we talked about in the first episode of Countdown to Classic apply to the Burning Crusade? P.S. everyone, please do go back and listen to that very first episode of Countdown to Classic if you haven't already. And for that matter, please download and listen to all the Countdown to Classics if you're enjoying the show thus far, because they're all pretty much like this. And you know what? Even if you hate listening, go back and grab the other ones as well. Glad to have you on board. Anyway, I loved the Burning Crusade personally. I really did. What was happening at the time then for me? Well, my girlfriend at the time picked up the game. We started playing it, not at the same time, but sort of in tandem with each other. And we started calling out our character names when we climaxed. Okay, maybe we didn't quite do that. That's Sam, something maybe not to look forward to. Who knows? But life was good. Would I like to play the Burning Crusade again? Sure. But I'd rather have vanilla. And I don't really want to get too far ahead of myself or have anything compromise that vanilla dream. I mean, look at us. We haven't even got WoW Classic and we're already asking for more. Give us the Burning Crusade. Give us Classic Wrath, whatever it might be. Guys, let's get vanilla first. Let's take care of number one first. But the anti-argument for the Burning Crusade servers comes from user Mr. Copa Ketik. I think I've said that right. Who says the following. The question is, how? Does Blizzard really want to trivialize Naxx gear with Outland Greens again? Do they want progression from all vanilla raid tiers made utterly redundant once more? I just can't see it. That does not even consider how servers would be affected. Creating a mass exodus of 50+% of the population, leaving a deserted wasteland server state, isn't exactly considerate to your vanilla player base. The only way Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King content additions will work in Classic is if they are implemented with horizontal progression in mind and have the vanilla gameplay experience painstakingly preserved as much as possible. Now that's a really good point. What would happen to the vanilla servers, or should I say the World of Warcraft Classic servers that we're about to get, that we just fought so hard for, if we then, sorry, I say we, I didn't do a fucking thing, you guys fought so hard for it, if we then start to splinter off into different expansion servers? How absurd would a server for every expansion be? Now personally, I don't think Blizz will do this. Only going by what they have said so far. They've blatantly said they do not want to work on two games. However, money could change that perception. But if we now have the cycle where we're just repeating what we went through before, oh, here's Burning Crusade again, here's Wrath again, and so forth, and so forth. What, I don't really understand why we would necessarily want to do that again. So that what, in like 2025 we're getting Legion Classic. Like it's kind of head scratching and going, what's it all for? But the user brings up another couple of good points about the itemization changes that happened with Burning Crusade. Do we necessarily want to repeat that and have people slave away in Classic for quite some time trying to get through Naxx and then just have that all changed once again by these greens that just supersede everything straight off the bat as soon as you walk into Outland? Well, how do we potentially combat that? Horizontal progression, perhaps. Take away the vertical progression that BC gave us. Would that effectively mean retuning Burning Crusade for level 60? I'm not quite sure if that's what they were suggesting, but that could be a possible option. I know some of you are screaming, we just play with hypotheticals here. I'm not calling for this. I'm just saying this is what could be done. Send me your thoughts. Could you imagine going through Burning Crusade content as a level 60 after you're done with Naxx and have that kind of progression go that way? Maybe technically they would still be vertical progression. I don't know. I'm insane. You tell me what you think. We move back to the pro-Burning Crusade argument with this submission from user Scaletta467 in reply to that last submission. That sucks to be you then. If half the people want to switch to Burning Crusade, there's nothing you can do. You want to keep them in vanilla, so you have a more populated server for yourself. You're being more than just selfish. Especially as you don't seem to realize it's not a simple decision of play vanilla or play Burning Crusade. There are more options, like, for example, not playing at all anymore because you grew bored of vanilla and Burning Crusade doesn't exist. So, people will leave the server anyway. You argue for a way of doing things that would mean nothing but the slow bleeding out of players until we end up with the same result you don't want under any circumstances. Half the player base not playing vanilla anymore. Now, the point that user raises is this. If we don't do Burning Crusade servers eventually, then the model will lead to a slow bleed out of numbers and the eventual death of the Classic project. Keeping people locked in on Classic after a couple of years does nothing but jail them in on the version of the game that you prefer, not taking into account that others may well like chocolate ice cream as opposed to vanilla ice cream and Legion ice cream. Yes, look, I see what this user is saying in terms of we can't just have the end of the road be Nax. If we basically have Classic never updated in any way, and when I say updated, I mean give some form of progression post-Nax, then the subscriber base and the general fervor for Classic will die away and users will dwindle. So why would we force the killing off of this project that we just fought so hard for when we know that the natural progression is going to be moving on to Outland and going through the Burning Crusade over again? Now, I don't necessarily subscribe to this theory, but it is an interesting point. It's actually a point that probably economically, from Blizzard's point of view, makes the most sense. They're probably sitting there going, yeah, why the fuck would we just leave you in Classic for a few years? We're going to push you somewhere else. But on that, we have back to the anti-argument from user Varsuvius, who says this. Same here minus the Nax. In vanilla, I was among the front line of raiders. We just didn't get far into Nax because we were in a late batch of servers. In Burning Crusade, I stayed hardcore for a few months, but the transition from 40-20 to 25-10 wasn't that smooth on my server. Most guilds got internal conflicts, and then subgroups from several guilds would form a new one, etc. And by the time the dust had settled, I was more casual, also because of work commitments. I never saw Sunwell Plateau or the raids before that one. Black Temple or Hyjal? I would love to do Burning Crusade raid progression. Now, what that user is suggesting is that would we just be repeating the same mistakes if we go through a Burning Crusade Classic release? Or will we go through the whole changes versus no changes debate again? God, could you imagine that? We're in the midst of it now with WoW Classic. Imagine Burning Crusade changes versus no changes arguments. God. But Burning Crusade did change things a lot, obviously, from WoW Vanilla. So why bother just rinsing and repeating and doing the whole cycle again? We just did this over the last 10 years. And basically, is the end game really just to do another 10 years of expansions? Is that what Blizzard wants to do? But as this guy says, Justin RG 904, I dread the day we get classic Warlords of Draenor, my least favorite expansion. And I would agree with that. At what point does it get a little bit silly when we're just doing a classic version of every expansion? Are we just going to have servers for all the different expansions? I just can't see Blizzard getting that involved in this crazy classic project, but who knows? We move back to the pro argument with this from L Hearts. I'm really looking forward to Burning Crusade. Classic will get cleansed of all retardants and ferals. Now, while that's a little bit of a prickly term for some people, I think the point that user is raising is that what they're trying to say is a certain class of player is the type of person that will want to play the Burning Crusade Classic. And some of the hardcore vanilla players, the ones who advocated for this game in the first place, would perhaps be happy to see them go over to the Burning Crusade servers. Who knows? The argument there is that the flood of new players that came with the Burning Crusade may have helped contribute to the slow decay of the game and led us to the current pro-casual state that World of Warcraft is in now. I'm not of that position. I'm telling you, don't throw your rotten fruit at me. But some people do believe that the Burning Crusade changed the game just enough that it opened up a slightly more casual angle that just got worse and worse with time. As I said, I loved Burning Crusade. Maybe I am one of those filthy casuals that the game brought in at that time. No, I was playing well before Burning Crusade. But the point remains that perhaps that is the case. Who knows? Now, back to the anti-argument. LTCVCD says this: I would rather have 1.13 with 60 level Karazhan, a new battleground like Azshara Crater, or other scrapped content versus Burning Crusade content. The way they are doing this could totally be seen as an alternate timeline due to Chromie. Now that user just raised a word that we haven't said here yet on Countdown to Classic, and that word is Karazhan. And the reason we haven't said the word Karazhan yet is because Karazhan was not in Vanilla WoW. However, look, I loved Karazhan. I don't think that's really up for debate. Most of us really, really loved Karazhan. It is one of the more beloved instances from the game and just so much damn fun. But how do we want things to be done with World of Warcraft Classic? So with regard to Karazhan, do we just want Karazhan from the Burning Crusade released into WoW Classic at some point and that's it? Or, wait for it, do we want new content altogether in a post-Naxx world? I have seen a lot of posts asking and wishing about the possibility of flat-out new content in WoW Classic after Naxx. Now think about it. Heresy or not? A lot of people say yes, absolute heresy, no new content whatsoever. Keep us in Classic Land and that's it. Now, the reason I'm raising this is a hypothetical. Again, put your rotten fruit away. Let's imagine a world where Classic has been out for 2 years and a third of your server has had Naxx on farm for the past 6 months. Would you want new content to move on to after Naxx, or would you want to just keep rolling through the same game with new alts? Now, there's an argument for both. The alternative is sort of eternal limbo with WoW Classic, or until Blizz shuts down the servers, that is, but some people are okay with that. The other alternative is making up new content that might rub some people the wrong way because it wasn't in World of Warcraft in the vanilla days. But if they released new 60 dungeons, obviously some people might say, well, all you're doing there is releasing effectively expansion content, and that's how we went down the wrong path before. So no, just leave it all alone. And I completely understand that. I personally don't really know how I feel about this, but I'd love to hear the arguments both ways. And now that I've gotten you all riled up with that incredibly controversial final point, it's time for anger management. Each week, Countdown to Classic brings you some of the angriest posts that I've found through my adventures in the forums during the week. And the first post I bring you is from user Autism Prime, who we heard from earlier. And this was in regard to the Alex Sensual saga we touched on earlier. And Autism Prime says the following: people would have been spamming that shit with or without him doing this. He just added X amount more. I haven't seen one Blizz Q&A where people weren't spamming Classic. Even before Alex started doing this crap. Twitch is a fucking meme. Half the people spamming probably don't even actually care about Classic. The next post is from user Holy Knight, who says the following: yeah, there aren't brats, elitists, or generally crummy communities on live servers. Some people really do have more money than sense, and it looks like sour grapes when they try to justify why they're spending hundreds of dollars on a single game. It's hilarious, the biased rhetoric I'm seeing. Why does it matter if people who play on private servers are criminals? People who jaywalk are criminals. Do you think differently of jaywalkers because they're criminals the same way you think differently of people who play on private servers? Sincerely hope your answer is yes. so it can be made clear to everyone with a brain how intelligent you actually are. And I won't need to prove it any further. This tells us nothing significant about their character, so why bring it up? Just being a criminal does not imply nearly as much as these logically challenged individuals are trying to lead on. To be fair, if I was spending hundreds of dollars over the course of years for a single game when there are people playing a better version of it for free, I would also be going through mental gymnastics to justify it to myself. And the final post for anger management comes from Reddit user Brad to the Bone 2, who says the following: Roffle, one for the record books. I hope Classic isn't part of your job right now, because whoever's job it is, they're doing terribly at it. All you guys as a team have done is silence and frustrate tens of thousands of people who just want to help Classic be a success. You guys have done nothing but allow the community to rot away. Gone are the voices of those who cared, and all that remains is those who profit off of their opinion being heard. Nobody that has been following Classic discussion for multiple hours a day since the beginning wants to have any meaningful discussions anymore, because you guys have shown that you don't want to hear the community's opinion, that you don't read much of anything people say, and that you can't even help us discuss in a way that is constructive and not completely blind and filled with the uninformed masses. You could still salvage the situation by spending hundreds of hours reading discussions that have already happened. Roffle, I know that won't happen. Or you could actually do something for once and lead the discussion to actually be productive for once. I understand you only have so much power when it comes to what you're allowed to do, so only you can know if you're able to make a difference. I know I personally could make a difference too, but I don't even want to at this point. If Blizzard won't step up, I won't either. Who knows? Maybe in the future, Classic will still be good, even without proper community discussion. But there's a good chance that it could have been better had things gone differently. Mic drop. And now with that brilliant submission done, it's time to move on to this week's winners and losers.
It wasn't going to be easy, but they've won it.
Each Monday, Countdown to Classic brings you some of the most thoughtful, insightful, or just plain funny posts that I've found through the week on the forums. And the first winner I bring you this week is user Scoop, who in the Classic WoW subreddit was replying to the BFA Q&A post that we talked about at the very top of the show, and they put forward the following. Everyone on this subreddit should also listen to the response to this question. It's a timestamped YouTube link about giving good feedback. Everything, well, nearly everything, Ian says about feedback for Battle for Azeroth Alpha and the game in general also applies to Classic. Be specific. Explain your position. It's okay to be passionate, but try to be coherent and respectful. Don't try to speak for others. Don't try to speak for everyone. Speak for yourself. Some of this will apply more once there's a Classic, Alpha or Beta server up for testing, but most of it applies even now when people are just expressing what they hope for or expect from Classic. Hashtag no changes is meaningless feedback. Go over each specific part of the game and explain why you think it shouldn't be changed. Make your argument. Make your case. Say what was lost in the design trade-off when that thing was changed over WoW's development. Say what you think about it, not what some hypothetical other person thinks about it or some hypothetical new player. Don't claim to speak for everyone. I really did enjoy that nice grounded post, and I think that's a good start off for winners and losers. The next winner is user Hallucinatory Frog. Now, I'm going to have to go full Matthew McConaughey for this one, and you'll understand when I get through the quote, but just excuse the poor imitation, but here it goes. That's what I like about these twinks. I get stronger, and they stay the same level. McConaughey's not that easy to do. But please, if you think you can do that impersonation better, record it and send it to the show, and I will play it on the next podcast, guys. Have a bit of fun with the show. But now it's time for Memory Lane. Each Monday, I ask listeners to submit some of their funniest or most touching memories from vanilla World of Warcraft. Now, the first submission for Memory Lane this week comes from listener Nomon28, who emailed me with the following. Hi Josh, I'm a Canadian listener and a fan currently in Japan, and I've really been loving the podcast so far. Well, thank you so much, Nomon28. It's really a great way to ease the itch of the vanilla hype. I've had a bunch of free time recently at work, so I decided to write my WoW story from back in the day. Feel free to feature any part of it or not for Memory Lane. Now, this is a bit of a long one, everyone, but damn it, if you take the time to write to the show, I will do my best to get it out there, as long as it has a funny or a touching point. And not touching in the molesting way, more in the tear-jerking way. No, not that kind of jerk, tear-jerk. There's a big difference. You know what? Just forget about it. Let's get to the story. I'm going to have to paraphrase this one. Apologies to Nomon28, but I've cut it down a little bit, but now we're going to get to it. When the closed beta for WoW began, some lucky people got access keys to test out the game. I can't remember how keys were obtained, probably some kind of lottery, and I hadn't gotten one. On the forums, people would occasionally gift keys to random people, due to having extras or not needing them for whatever reason. There was one key giveaway, whose donor made a contest out of it. He would give the key to whoever could convince him that they wanted or deserved the key the most. I teamed up with 2 other random people from the forum, and we made a plea together. We said that we would share the key by dividing the daytime into shifts, since we all had different availabilities. The donor liked the idea of the key going to a trio who would make ample use of it, and so we were given the key. I'll never forget my first foray into the world. I picked a Night Elf Druid. That starting zone truly holds a special place in my heart to this day. On one of the last days of the closed beta, I was something like level 16 working my way through the Darkshore quests. A huge group of allied players of all levels showed up in Orbadine and declared that they were recruiting for a raid on the Barrens. I joined them. We painstakingly marched through Ashen Vale, lobies like myself occasionally dying to terrifying 20-something mobs, or rescued by the higher level players. We eventually made it to the border post at the entrance to the Barrens with its NPC guards. At this point, we'd also gotten the attention of Horde players, and a huge battle ensued. We pretty much got crushed right then and there, but I still remember that raid as one of the most exhilarating gaming experiences of my life. But then the game was released in full. My parents didn't allow me to play more than 3 hours a day, but I basically played every single day, never getting tired of it. I talked about WoW at school with my friends who also played. At night, I dreamt of WoW. I was obsessed, and yet I was a casual in the game. I guess that's the moral of my story. Casual players can also be immensely passionate about the game and get every bit as much enjoyment out of it as the hardcore crowd. Now, that one resonates with me because I did toe the line somewhat between casual and hardcore. I probably leaned much more towards casual, considering I never got to raid or anything in WoW Vanilla, and some people would say, like, if you didn't raid, you're casual, blah, blah, blah. But I put a lot of time into the game. Now, I would argue that if you're putting in 3 hours a day into the game every day, Nomon28, you are far from casual. You are much more hardcore than you probably thought, brother. Kudos to you for getting your time in. I wish I could have played that much, but law school kept me back. Yeah, what has that ever done for me lately, except for paying my bills now? But anyway, that's besides the point. The next submission comes from Armadil, who we heard from last week, who wrote back to us again with the following. While leveling up, I found a nice grinding spot with a bunch of ogres. Every once in a while, they drop some grey quality pants called Ripped Ogre Loincloth. By the time I was done grinding, I had quite the collection of them. I was curious, so I put on one of the loincloths to see what it looked like on my character. Clearly, I thought, these loincloths were too good to simply sell to a vendor. No, I had to put them to better use. I flew back to Orgrimmar, bought some wrapping paper from the general goods vendor, and lovingly wrapped each loincloth into a gift box. I then walked over to the mailbox and sent my favourite guild members a gift that they would never forget, along with a personalised message. I made sure to be very descriptive about how I peeled their gift off a particularly sweaty ogre body. The responses I got were mixed. Most were amused, some were confused, and a few refused to answer. I think the smiles were worth it. And I would agree. It's always fun to have a bit of fun within the World of Warcraft. So kudos to you, Armadillo, and thank you again for the story. The final story this week for Memory Lane comes from Valda, who emailed me the following. I go by Valda, and I am the younger brother of Armadillo. Well, look at that. You guys are telling your friends and family about the show. I couldn't appreciate that more. P.S. I do not know these guys. I want everyone to know that. But I love that everyone is putting other people onto the show. And I please encourage all of my listeners, if you do enjoy the show, go and tell a friend. Go and tell a family member. Hey, check out this podcast, Countdown to Classic. It's a lot of fun. I really would appreciate you helping me grow this listener base, guys, because the larger the listener base grows, the more that we can do with this show. Anyway, back to Valda's story. While my brother Armadillo was primarily a PvP god on his server, my guild stuck with mid to high tier PvE content, though the only boss I killed in Nax was Mr. Bigglesworth. Shortly after the release of Blackwing Lair in 1.6, we were struggling with Valistraz, the guild breaker. His short time limit, guaranteed tank deaths, and living bomb mechanic was proving too much for a lot of our members' struggling PCs and laptops to keep up with. As the third tank to die, my main job was simple: spam execute and keep my threat up. Even with my comparatively simple role in the fight, it felt frantic. The boss was always yelling. High-cost abilities finally spammable. Add-ons were pinging non-stop. And Vent was filled with the orders of our raid leaders. All I could see was the side of the dragon and the colours of 40 people's spells exploding off of the boss's body. But it was finally happening. The boss was finally dying faster than we were. And as the boss reaches 1%, the celebrations were already blasting through my speakers. As the final blows are landed and Vale dies, Vent erupts as the jubilation of hours of struggle, repairs, and frustrations are immediately relieved. Before we see our reward for the victory, the healers get to work rezzing the downed tanks. Just as the roars of celebration start to die down, we hear one of our hunters ask quietly in the background, "Can you still explode after the boss is dead?" Seconds later, boom. All of our healers pop instantly as we have a post-boss wipe. The only survivors were unable to res, and we all had to do a rare, celebratory walk of shame from the graveyard. Never had I been so happy to have not clicked accept resurrection immediately. From Valda of the Fibonacci sequence on Khadgar. And Valda has a little bit more when he says, P.S., a short story. You know how Ragnaros would send all melee flying into the air periodically? Well, the youngest warrior in the guild would almost always eat that punch to the face. Just once, Rag turned him and smacked him out of the sky with his random target explosion at the peak of his knockback, killing him mid-air. We wiped that attempt, and as the healers gathered round below his corpse, they found he was out of range. Our plucky little mascot warrior was forced to be the only one to walk back after a successful kill. And Valda did send me a lovely screenshot of that person's body helplessly floating mid-air, unable to be rezzed. I'll hopefully try and remember to put that on the website at some stage. But thank you very much for that one, Valda. And with that, everyone, we'll come to the wind down of this episode of Countdown to Classic. But just a few thank yous and shout outs that I want to get through before I officially say goodbye. I just want to give a really big thanks to everyone who has jumped on board the Countdown to Classic Discord channel and gotten involved in the chats happening there. Users like Minoru especially have been getting super involved with that, and also thanks to Minoru for jumping on my new Twitch channel. Also thanks to users Thado, Rockmaster and Grayson for getting involved in that Discord chat. So as I said, guys, I have Discord, I have Twitch. What's happening is we've got a Discord channel up and running. We've got a fair few people getting involved already. Please do look up the details on the website. I put up a post with the link that you click to add yourself to the Discord channel. Come and say hello. This is all about fan engagement. Let me know your thoughts on what I've said in this episode. Let me know your thoughts on what you want in future episodes. Come talk WoW in general. It's a really positive, really welcoming group, and we'd love to have you. As far as Twitch goes, I am officially, for the first time in my life, streaming now. I have resubbed back to WoW Retail, and I'm leveling a character back up to cap just to check out what's going on in retail after so many years away and to help with the discussions of this podcast, I feel. So, if you'd like to have a chat with me while I play World of Warcraft, find my details on the website or simply follow me on Twitch at Countdown to Classic. Now, what I'm going to be doing is a little bit of streaming here and there. I can't really lock down when I'm going to do it, but if you follow me on Twitter, then I'll announce when I'm jumping online, and obviously if you follow me on Twitch, you'll get some kind of announcement when I'm on as well. So please do come on and have a chat with me. I had a wonderful chat for a couple of hours the other day with a couple of users who wanted to know more about the show and myself, and that was really good fun. So please do jump on. We're incredibly social here at Countdown to Classic. That is the name of the game. Now, show news. Super Soaker is coming, everyone. Soon, soon, soon. I promise. We're recording next week, and I really hope to publish that interview in early April. It will be interview style. It will be Countdown to Classic style. It's going to be cheeky, fun, and more importantly, very informative about World of Warcraft Classic. And I can't wait to hear a few things that Super Soaker is going to have to say in response to the questions that I've got lined up for him. I have been in touch with a bunch of other content creators, but it has been difficult getting people's schedules lined up and also getting people to get back to me. Obviously, being a brand new podcast, I understand that some people might be a bit skeptical to come on the show. People, I have been in touch with include S-Fans, Tip. They're more than happy to come on the show. It's just a matter of lining up when and where it's going to happen. I reached out to other people but haven't heard back yet. People that might be a bit sort of optimistic on my behalf. People like Mark Kern, Alex Sensual, Monkey News, Perplexity, heaps of YouTube users, things like that. They haven't got back to me yet because they probably don't know about the show, but if they do, I'm hoping they might agree to come on. But the one thing that's really going to help everyone is, how about this? If there's a content creator that you really want to hear from and you want to hear them interviewed by me, a great interviewer, and want them to have a bit of fun on the show, and I promise it will be funny and cheeky, just like you used to here on Countdown to Classic, and also, most importantly, highly informative, then message your favorite content creators and say, hey, Countdown to Classic is looking for people to talk to. Would you be interested in going on that show? And they might say, what's a Countdown to Classic? At which point you say, it's this totally rocking show by this dude in Australia. You should totally check it out. But anyway, guys, go forth, put the word out. Let's get some more voices on the show because it's only going to benefit you in the end. So, finally, I wanted to do a little bit of a shout out to some locations through the world that have been downloading the show. And what I originally planned to do was do a bit of a state watch in the US. And I was looking at Montana, who hadn't downloaded anything yet, but then they did. And kind of in the first 2 weeks of the show, we've now covered off all 50 states of the US that have heard us. So, what I'm going to be doing is looking at some countries. And we've now been downloaded in over 57 countries worldwide, which is fantastic. As I say, the thousands and thousands of downloads that are coming in now are well above and beyond my wildest dreams. And the one country I've highlighted this week is we're going to go on Belarus watch. So I'm basically getting a lot of downloads in Europe, and there's a few countries just there that are holding out on me, and I'm looking at you, Belarus. So I want to download from Belarus, and I'm going to keep mentioning it on the show until I get one. If you know someone in Belarus, maybe tell them about the show. If you're in a neighboring country, let's get the word out, people. I love you, Europe, and I'm glad to see that you're listening to the show. Anyway, everyone, we've got our Way Back Wednesday episode coming up soon, and this week it's going to be all about Shadowfang Keep and Worgen Law. So stay tuned for that one. It's going to be a lot of fun. And for now, that's it for Countdown to Classic this Monday. Thanks again so much for listening, and I can't wait to see you again in the future. Thanks, everyone.